My wife protected herself with a prenup. Little did she know I was about to inherit $2 billion. Daniel Thompson had just received the most shocking phone call of his life. He was the sole heir to a fortune his wife Emma never knew existed. As Emma pushed for their prenuptial agreement, claiming she needed to protect her assets, Daniel faced an impossible choice. Should he tell her the truth about his inheritance, or let her sign the contract that would ensure she'd never see a penny of his newfound wealth? The woman who thought she was protecting herself from his financial failures was about to make the most expensive mistake of her life. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you're excited to see what comes next, and comment below where you're watching from: Seattle, New York City, or Boston. Let's dive back into the story of how Daniel's secret inheritance will change everything forever. Daniel Thompson adjusted his glasses and stared at the lines of code flickering across his computer screen, but his mind wandered elsewhere. The Chicago office of TechFlow Solutions buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy, yet he felt disconnected from it all. At 45, he had settled into a rhythm that felt more like survival than living. His cubicle overlooked the parking garage where his aging Honda Civic sat among the BMWs and Audis of his younger colleagues. The software engineering job paid decently, enough to contribute his half of the mortgage on the Lincoln Park townhouse he shared with Emma, but lately even that felt insufficient. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Working late again tonight, client dinner. Don't wait up." Daniel's jaw tightened as he read the message. Emma's client dinners had become increasingly frequent over the past 6 months, always with important cases that required her undivided attention. As one of Chicago's rising corporate lawyers, she commanded respect in boardrooms and courtrooms alike. Her salary at Preston & Associates dwarfed his income by a factor of 2, a reality that had gradually shifted the dynamics of their relationship in ways neither of them openly acknowledged. The walk home through Lincoln Park felt longer than usual that evening. Daniel stopped at their favorite coffee shop, the one where they used to spend Sunday mornings reading newspapers and planning weekend getaways. Now Emma preferred the upscale cafe near her office, claiming their old haunt had become too crowded with students. He ordered his usual black coffee and sat by the window, watching couples stroll hand in hand along the tree-lined streets. The sight stirred something painful in his chest, a longing for intimacy that had slowly eroded from his marriage. Their townhouse stood elegant and imposing, a testament to Emma's success and careful financial planning. She had chosen everything from the granite countertops to the hardwood floors, consulting him only on minor details like paint colors. Daniel unlocked the front door and stepped into the pristine living room, where every piece of furniture spoke of sophistication and success. The silence greeted him like an old companion, familiar yet unwelcome. He heated leftover pasta in the microwave and ate alone at their dining table, designed for entertaining guests who rarely came. Emma arrived home after midnight, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she climbed the stairs. Daniel pretended to sleep, listening to her careful movements in the bathroom, the soft rustle of expensive fabric as she undressed. When she finally slipped into bed beside him, the space between them felt vast despite the physical proximity. Her breathing settled into the steady rhythm of sleep while Daniel stared at the ceiling, wondering when they had become strangers sharing a mortgage. The morning brought another familiar routine. Emma left early for a breakfast meeting, kissing his cheek with the same mechanical affection she might show a distant relative. Daniel watched from the kitchen window as she backed her silver Mercedes out of the driveway, already talking animatedly on her phone headset. The house felt hollow without her presence, yet somehow more peaceful. He found himself questioning whether her absence brought relief or sadness, unable to distinguish between the two emotions anymore. At work, Daniel's colleague Marcus from the IT department stopped by his cubicle to discuss a project deadline. Marcus was everything Daniel wasn't: young, confident, and effortlessly charming. His expensive suits and easy smile had made him popular among both clients and staff. As they talked about database architecture, Daniel noticed how Marcus's eyes lit up when he mentioned working closely with legal firms downtown. Something about his expression triggered an uncomfortable feeling in Daniel's stomach, though he couldn't quite identify why. The remainder of the day dragged on with meetings and code reviews, but Daniel's thoughts kept drifting to his marriage. 8 years ago, Emma had been drawn to his quiet intelligence and steady presence. She used to say he grounded her ambitious spirit, provided the stability she needed to soar professionally. Now he wondered if she saw him as an anchor weighing her down rather than a foundation supporting her dreams. Their conversations had become transactional, focused on schedules and household responsibilities rather than hopes and fears. That evening, Emma surprised him by coming home for dinner. She seemed unusually animated, talking about a new case involving a high-profile divorce with complex asset division. Her eyes sparkled with professional excitement as she described the intricate legal maneuvers required to protect her client's wealth. Daniel listened, trying to match her enthusiasm, but couldn't shake the feeling that her passion for her work had replaced whatever passion she once felt for him. As they cleared the dishes together, Emma broached a subject that caught him off guard. She mentioned attending a seminar on prenuptial agreements and their importance in protecting individual assets acquired during marriage. Her tone was casual, almost academic, but Daniel sensed an underlying purpose to the conversation. When he asked why she brought it up, Emma laughed it off, claiming it was merely professional curiosity. Yet something in her demeanor suggested otherwise, leaving Daniel with an uneasy feeling that would haunt him long after she returned to her home office to work late into the night. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, its cream-colored prior and formal letterhead immediately distinguishing it from the usual bills and advertisements. Daniel turned it over in his hands, noting the embossed logo of Morrison & Associates, a law firm he'd never heard of. The return address showed a prestigious downtown Chicago office building, the kind where Emma's most successful colleagues worked. His name was written in elegant script across the front, followed by his complete address in formal business style. Inside, the letter bore the signature of Robert Morrison, senior partner, requesting Daniel's presence for a matter concerning his late grandfather's estate. The words felt surreal as Daniel read them twice, then a third time. Henry Morrison. The name meant nothing to him, yet according to the letter, this stranger had left specific instructions regarding Daniel Thompson as his sole beneficiary. A scheduled appointment was proposed for the following Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, with a request to bring identification and any family documents relating to his maternal lineage. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone to call his mother. Sarah Thompson lived in a modest apartment on Chicago's South Side, where she had raised him alone after his father disappeared when Daniel was 7 years old. She had worked double shifts as a nurse to keep food on their table and clothes on his back, never speaking much about her own family or past relationships. When Daniel asked about grandparents during his childhood, she would change the subject or mention vaguely that they weren't part of their lives anymore. The conversation with his mother began normally enough, with discussions about her recent doctor's appointment and the new medication for her arthritis. When Daniel mentioned Henry Morrison's name, however, the silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Sarah's voice came through, smaller and more fragile than he'd ever heard it. She asked him to visit her that evening, saying some stories were too complicated for phone conversations and required sitting face to face. That evening, Daniel drove through the familiar streets of his childhood neighborhood, past the corner store where he'd bought candy with quarters earned from odd jobs and the basketball court where he'd spent countless summer afternoons. Sarah's apartment building looked smaller than he remembered, its brick facade weathered by decades of Chicago winters. She greeted him at the door with a hug that lasted longer than usual, her eyes carrying a weight he'd never noticed before. Sarah made tea in her tiny kitchen, moving with the careful deliberation of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. When they settled into her worn living room chairs, she began speaking in measured tones about a time in her life she'd kept hidden for over 4 decades. At 19, she had worked as a receptionist at a downtown medical office, where she met James Morrison, the charming son of one of Chicago's wealthiest families. Their romance blossomed quickly, filled with stolen moments and secret meetings that James insisted were necessary to protect both of them. The Morrison family owned construction companies, real estate developments, and investment firms throughout the Midwest. James's father, Henry Morrison, had built an empire through calculated business decisions and strategic partnerships with the city's political elite. When James brought Sarah home to meet his family, the reception was polite but unmistakably cold. Henry's wife made subtle comments about Sarah's background and education, while Henry himself remained distant and evaluative throughout the uncomfortable dinner. When Sarah discovered she was pregnant with Daniel, James initially promised they would marry and face his family's disapproval together. However, Henry Morrison had different plans for his son's future. He offered Sarah a substantial sum of money to leave Chicago and never contact James again, making it clear that a mixed-race grandchild would not be welcomed into the Morrison legacy. James, caught between love and family loyalty, ultimately chose the path of least resistance, accepting his father's arrangement for a strategic marriage to the daughter of another wealthy family. Sarah had refused Henry's money but accepted his demand that she disappear from James's life. She moved to the South Side and raised Daniel alone, working multiple jobs while completing her nursing degree at night. She never told Daniel about his father's identity or the Morrison family connection, believing it would only cause him pain to know about a grandfather who had rejected him before birth. James died in a car accident when Daniel was 10 years old, never knowing his son or attempting to make contact. The revelation left Daniel reeling, his entire understanding of his family history suddenly rewritten. Sarah explained that she had kept newspaper clippings about the Morrison family over the years, watching from afar as Henry built his business empire while James lived a life of quiet compliance until his untimely death. She had often wondered if Henry ever regretted his choices, especially after James passed away, leaving no other children to carry on the family name. Now apparently Henry Morrison had died with Daniel as his sole surviving heir, a grandson he had never met but perhaps never forgot. Sarah reached into an old shoebox and withdrew a faded photograph of herself and James from 1976, their young faces radiant with happiness and hope. Looking at his father's features, Daniel could see traces of his own face reflected back at him, a genetic legacy he'd never known existed. The drive home felt surreal, Chicago's skyline blurred by tears Daniel hadn't realized were falling. Everything he thought he knew about himself had shifted, revealing layers of family drama and racial prejudice that predated his birth. As he pulled into his driveway, Emma's Mercedes was nowhere to be seen, probably still at another client dinner or working late at the office. The empty house suddenly felt like a blessing, giving him space to process this earth-shattering information without having to explain his emotional state to a wife who seemed increasingly distant and preoccupied with her own concerns. 3 days after his revelatory conversation with his mother, Daniel sat across from Emma at their breakfast table, watching her methodically spread organic almond butter on whole grain toast. The morning light streaming through their kitchen windows illuminated her face, highlighting the subtle changes that years of ambitious career climbing had etched around her eyes. She wore her favorite navy blazer, the one that made her feel invincible in courtrooms, and her hair was pulled back in the severe bun she favored for important meetings. Emma cleared her throat delicately, a gesture Daniel had learned to recognize as the prelude to significant announcements. She set down her knife with practiced precision and folded her hands on the table, adopting the same composed posture she used when addressing juries. Her words came carefully measured, each syllable chosen for maximum impact and minimum emotional vulnerability. She had been thinking seriously about their financial security and the importance of protecting individual assets in an increasingly complicated economic landscape. The suggestion caught Daniel completely off guard, though Emma presented it with the clinical detachment of a legal consultation. A prenuptial agreement, she explained, would provide clarity and protection for both of their professional achievements and personal investments. She emphasized that such arrangements had become standard practice among successful couples, particularly those in high-stakes careers where asset accumulation varied significantly between partners. Her tone suggested this was merely a logical business decision rather than any reflection on their personal relationship. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, a mixture of hurt and indignation that he struggled to control. 8 years of marriage, and suddenly she needed legal protection from him. He studied her face, searching for some hint of the woman who had once trusted him completely, who had shared dreams of growing old together without lawyers and contracts defining their love. Instead, he found only the polished professionalism of a successful attorney who had learned to compartmentalize emotions from practical decisions. Emma continued her explanation with increasing confidence, citing statistics about divorce rates and asset disputes that made prenuptial agreements sound like insurance policies against inevitable disaster. She mentioned colleagues who had faced lengthy legal battles during divorces, losing substantial portions of their hard-earned wealth due to inadequate protection. Her voice took on the persuasive quality she used in closing arguments, building a case for why this contract would benefit them both rather than create divisions between them. The irony of the timing wasn't lost on Daniel, though Emma remained unaware of the inheritance revelation that had turned his world upside down just days earlier. As she outlined the benefits of protecting her salary, her retirement accounts, and her potential partnership stake at Preston and Associates, Daniel wondered what she would say if she knew about the Morrison fortune. Would she suddenly find their marriage more valuable? Or would her legal instincts kick in even harder, demanding an even more comprehensive agreement to protect her from any claim on his newfound wealth? Daniel's mind raced with questions he couldn't voice. Why now, after 8 years of shared financial decisions and joint investments? What had changed in their relationship to make her feel vulnerable to his potential claims on her success? He thought about their recent conversations, searching for clues about her motivations, and remembered her unusual interest in high-profile divorce cases and asset protection strategies. Perhaps those weren't merely professional curiosities after all. Emma produced a folder from her briefcase revealing that she had already consulted with a colleague who specialized in family law. Draft documents lay inside, bearing the letterhead of Morrison and Associates, ironically the same firm that had contacted Daniel about his inheritance. She explained that her colleague Marcus had recommended this particular practice for their expertise in complex asset protection, speaking highly of their discretion and thoroughness in handling sensitive marital agreements. The mention of Marcus sent an uncomfortable jolt through Daniel's system. He remembered the charming IT consultant who had visited their office recently, the one whose eyes lit up when discussing work with downtown law firms. Emma's voice softened slightly when she mentioned Marcus's name, a subtle shift that Daniel might have missed if he weren't already feeling hypersensitive about their relationship dynamics. She described Marcus as incredibly knowledgeable about legal matters despite his technology background, praising his insights into modern relationship challenges. Daniel forced himself to maintain composure while internal alarm bells rang increasingly loudly. Emma's explanations began to feel rehearsed, as though she had practiced these arguments beforehand, perhaps during one of her many late evening work sessions or client dinners. He wondered how long she had been planning this conversation, how many people she had consulted before approaching him with documents already prepared for his signature. As Emma continued outlining the benefits of their proposed agreement, Daniel made a decision that surprised even himself. He would sign whatever documents she wanted, but he would not reveal the Morrison inheritance until after the contracts were finalized. If Emma truly needed protection from his financial claims, then she deserved to understand exactly what she was protecting herself from and what she might be giving up in the process. The breakfast concluded with Emma expressing relief at his apparent cooperation, though Daniel noticed she avoided direct eye contact during her expressions of gratitude. She gathered the legal documents carefully, promising to review the details with her colleague and have everything properly prepared for signatures within the week. Her demeanor had returned to its usual professional efficiency, but Daniel detected an underlying tension that hadn't been there before their conversation began. As Emma left for another early morning meeting, Daniel remained at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where her folder had rested. The woman he had married would never have approached their relationship like a business transaction requiring legal safeguards. Something fundamental had shifted in Emma's perspective on their marriage, and Daniel suspected the prenuptial agreement was merely the first step in a larger plan that she hadn't yet revealed. The revelation about Marcus's involvement added another layer of complexity to an already confusing situation. Daniel resolved to learn more about this helpful colleague who seemed so interested in Emma's legal affairs, wondering if professional consultation was the only service Marcus was providing to his increasingly distant wife. The following Thursday afternoon found Daniel sitting in the opulent conference room of Morrison and Associates, surrounded by mahogany paneling and oil paintings of distinguished Chicago luminaries. Robert Morrison, a silver-haired gentleman in his 70s, reviewed documents with the careful precision of someone accustomed to handling enormous sums of money. The inheritance details were staggering: $2 billion in liquid assets, commercial real estate holdings throughout the Midwest, and controlling shares in 3 major construction companies that Henry Morrison had built from nothing. Robert explained that Henry had spent his final years consumed by regret over his treatment of Sarah and the grandson he had never met. Private investigators had tracked Daniel's life from a distance, documenting his education, career progression, and marriage to Emma without his knowledge. Henry's will contains specific instructions that the inheritance should remain confidential until Daniel had time to process the magnitude of his newfound wealth and make informed decisions about his future. The legal complexities were overwhelming, but Robert's team had already begun the necessary transfers and tax preparations. Daniel would gain access to a substantial monthly allowance immediately, with full control over the estate following a 6-month transition period designed to help him adjust to his new circumstances. Investment advisors, tax specialists, and security consultants would be made available at his discretion, though Robert emphasized that discretion itself would be Daniel's most valuable asset during this vulnerable period. Walking home through downtown Chicago afterward, Daniel felt disconnected from the familiar cityscape around him. Office workers hurried past on their way to evening commitments, unaware that the man in the worn jacket and scuffed shoes had just become one of the wealthiest individuals in Illinois. The surreal nature of his situation intensified as he passed homeless individuals asking for spare change, knowing he could now solve their problems with pocket money while still struggling to comprehend his own transformed reality. That evening, Emma announced another client dinner with apologetic efficiency, gathering files and preparing for what she described as a crucial negotiation session. Daniel watched her apply lipstick in their hallway mirror, noting how he had chosen her most flattering dress and expensive perfume for this supposedly professional engagement. Her phone buzzed with a text message that brought an immediate smile to her face, though she quickly composed her expression when she noticed Daniel observing her reaction. Instead of spending another lonely evening at home, Daniel decided to follow his instincts and investigate Emma's mysterious client dinner. He drove to Preston and Associates and positioned himself across the street, feeling simultaneously guilty about his suspicions and compelled to understand the truth about his marriage. The law firm's parking garage provided perfect cover as he waited for Emma to emerge, hoping his fears would prove unfounded and his wife would appear alone or with obvious business colleagues. The reality proved far more painful than his worst suspicions. Emma emerged from the building with Marcus, their body language suggesting intimate familiarity rather than professional acquaintance. Marcus placed his hand on the small of Emma's back as he guided her toward his expensive sports car, a gesture that spoke of practiced intimacy and comfortable possession. They kissed briefly but passionately before getting into the vehicle, their behavior leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Daniel followed them to Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, where reservations typically required months of advanced planning and cost more than most people's weekly salaries. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, he watched Emma and Marcus share an elaborate tasting menu, their conversation animated and punctuated by frequent laughter and casual touches. Emma's face glowed with happiness Daniel hadn't seen directed toward him in over a year, her entire demeanor transformed by Marcus's attention and obvious adoration. The painful surveillance continued for nearly 3 hours as Daniel sat in his car, watching his wife enjoy an evening of romance and luxury with another man. Marcus appeared completely at ease in the upscale environment, his confidence and expensive clothing suggesting financial resources that far exceeded a typical IT consultant's salary. Emma seemed utterly captivated by his stories and charmed by his obvious wealth, leaning closer during their conversations and laughing at his jokes with genuine delight rather than polite obligation. When they finally left the restaurant, Marcus drove Emma to a luxury hotel in River North, where they disappeared into the lobby together. Daniel waited in his car for over an hour, hoping against hope that Emma would emerge alone and this would all prove to be some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, lights appeared in a high-floor suite, confirming his worst fears about how Emma planned to spend the remainder of her evening. The drive home felt endless, Chicago's familiar streets blurring through tears of anger and betrayal that Daniel hadn't anticipated. 8 years of marriage had been reduced to a carefully orchestrated deception, with Emma planning her exit strategy while maintaining the pretense of their relationship. The prenuptial agreement suddenly made perfect sense, not as protection for her assets, but as preparation for a divorce that she had clearly been contemplating for months, if not longer. Back in their empty townhouse, Daniel sat at the kitchen table where Emma had presented her legal documents just days earlier. The irony of her timing struck him with devastating clarity. She had requested protection from his financial claims just days before he inherited more money than she could possibly imagine. If she had known about the Morrison fortune, would she have abandoned her divorce plans and recommitted to their marriage? Or would her lawyer's instincts have kicked in even harder, demanding comprehensive protection from his sudden wealth? Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Emma claiming her client dinner was running later than expected, and she would probably stay at the downtown hotel rather than drive home tired. The casual lies felt like additional betrayals, each deception revealing how thoroughly she had compartmentalized her double life. She had become a stranger wearing his wife's face, someone capable of elaborate pretense while planning his abandonment. As midnight approached, Daniel made a decision that would define the remainder of their relationship. He would sign Emma's prenuptial agreement without revealing his inheritance, allowing her to proceed with whatever plans she had made with Marcus. If his wife needed legal protection from their marriage, then she deserved to understand exactly what she was protecting herself from, and what opportunities she was unknowingly forfeiting through her own calculations and betrayals. The confrontation came 3 days later, on a Saturday morning when Emma least expected it. She had returned home from another overnight business trip, her hair still carrying the faint scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't Daniel's. As she moved through their kitchen with practiced casualness, preparing coffee and checking emails on her phone, Daniel positioned himself strategically between her and the exit. His calm demeanor masked the storm of emotions that had been building since his discovery of her betrayal. Daniel's voice carried none of the anger Emma might have anticipated when he mentioned seeing her at Alinea with Marcus. Instead, his tone was measured and almost clinical, as though he were discussing a case study rather than the destruction of their marriage. He described the intimate dinner, the hotel visit, and the obvious comfort level between two people who had clearly been involved for some time. Emma's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hands, but she maintained her composure with the skill of an experienced attorney. Emma's initial response was to deny everything, claiming Marcus was simply a business associate helping her with technology integration for the law firm. Her explanations sounded rehearsed and desperate, lacking the conviction that usually characterized her professional presentations. She insisted the hotel meeting was purely coincidental, that Marcus had offered to drive her there for a client consultation that ran later than expected. Each justification rang hollow in the face of Daniel's detailed observations of their romantic interactions. When Daniel produced photographs he had discreetly taken from his car, Emma's defensive strategy crumbled entirely. The images clearly showed intimate embraces, passionate kisses, and body language that left no room for alternative interpretations. Her legal training kicked in as she shifted tactics, acknowledging the affair while attempting to minimize its significance and redirect blame toward their deteriorating marriage. She spoke about feeling neglected, unappreciated, and intellectually unstimulated by their relationship. The admission of her feelings for Marcus came with brutal honesty that cut deeper than Daniel had expected. Emma described how Marcus made her feel valued and desired in ways that their marriage had stopped providing years ago. She spoke about exciting conversations, shared ambitions, and a level of intellectual compatibility that she claimed had been missing from their relationship since the early years. Her voice softened when she mentioned Marcus's sophisticated understanding of her career goals and his genuine appreciation for her professional achievements. Emma's revelation about the timeline of their affair was particularly devastating. She and Marcus had been involved for nearly 8 months, conducting their relationship through carefully orchestrated business meetings, weekend conferences, and the client dinners that Daniel had never questioned. Marcus owned a successful cybersecurity consulting firm that catered to high-end legal practices, providing him with both substantial income and convenient access to Emma's professional world. The prenuptial agreement, Emma admitted, had been Marcus's suggestion rather than her own initiative. He had convinced her that protecting her assets was essential before pursuing divorce proceedings, particularly given the increasing complexity of modern asset division laws. Emma spoke about Marcus's previous divorce experience and his hard-learned wisdom about the importance of legal preparation before ending a marriage. She presented the prenup as a civilized approach to an inevitable conclusion rather than a calculated betrayal. Daniel listened to Emma's confessions with growing amazement at her ability to rationalize betrayal as practical planning. She spoke about their marriage as though it were a failed business venture that required careful liquidation rather than the destruction of promises and shared dreams. Her lawyer's mindset had transformed their relationship into a series of contractual obligations that could be dissolved through proper legal procedures and adequate financial protection. When Emma finished her explanations, Daniel surprised her by calmly agreeing to sign the prenuptial agreement. His unexpected cooperation caught her off guard, and she studied his face suspiciously, searching for hidden anger or attempts at manipulation. Daniel explained that he had no interest in fighting for assets from someone who clearly wanted nothing to do with him. If she needed legal protection from their marriage, he would provide it willingly and without contest. Emma's relief was palpable, though tempered by confusion about Daniel's cooperative attitude. She had expected anger, pleading, or desperate attempts to save their relationship. Instead, she found reasonable acceptance of their situation and practical willingness to facilitate her desired outcome. Daniel's calm demeanor suggested either emotional numbness or careful calculation that she couldn't quite decipher. As they discussed logistics for the divorce proceedings, Daniel made subtle inquiries about Marcus's financial situation and future plans. Emma spoke enthusiastically about Marcus's business success and his ambitious expansion plans into new markets throughout the Midwest. She mentioned his lakefront penthouse, his collection of luxury vehicles, and his impressive investment portfolio with obvious pride and excitement about sharing that lifestyle. Daniel's questions about their future together revealed Emma's complete commitment to her new relationship. She and Marcus had already discussed marriage, children, and long-term financial planning with the thoroughness of two attorneys preparing for a major acquisition. Emma spoke about leaving Preston and Associates to start her own practice with Marcus's financial backing, describing their partnership as both romantic and professional in ways that their marriage had never achieved. The conversation concluded with Emma expressing genuine gratitude for Daniel's understanding and cooperation. She acknowledged that their marriage had become more obligation than passion for both of them, and she appreciated his willingness to end things amicably rather than creating unnecessary drama or financial complications. Her tone suggested relief that she could move forward with Marcus without prolonged legal battles or emotional manipulation. After Emma left to spend the weekend with Marcus, Daniel sat alone in their kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a life they had built together. The irony of this situation was almost overwhelming. His wife had just confessed to an affair and requested a divorce, completely unaware that she was forfeiting a claim to billions of dollars through her own careful legal preparations. If she had known about his inheritance, would she have made different choices? The question would remain forever unanswered, but Daniel suspected her practical nature would have found ways to rationalize staying married to a billionaire. The prenuptial agreement signing took place the following Tuesday at Morrison & Associates, though Emma remained unaware of the firm's connection to Daniel's inheritance. She arrived dressed in her most professional attire, accompanied by Marcus, who had insisted on being present to provide emotional support during what he characterized as a difficult but necessary procedure. Daniel observed their interactions with detached curiosity, noting how Marcus's protective gestures and whispered reassurances revealed the depth of their relationship. Emma's signature flowed across the legal documents with confident strokes, each page representing another layer of protection from Daniel's potential financial claims. She seemed genuinely relieved as she completed the paperwork, frequently glancing at Marcus for approval and encouragement. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel as he watched his wife enthusiastically sign away her rights to wealth she couldn't imagine, all while believing she was safeguarding her own modest success. Marcus displayed obvious satisfaction as the contracts were finalized, his demeanor suggesting someone who had successfully orchestrated a complex business transaction. He spoke knowledgeably about asset protection strategies and praised Emma for her foresight in securing her financial independence before pursuing divorce proceedings. Daniel found Marcus's expertise in marital law curious for someone who supposedly specialized in cybersecurity consulting, though he kept his observations to himself. Within days of the signing, Daniel received final confirmation from Robert Morrison about the inheritance transfer. $2 billion now rested in accounts bearing his name, along with real estate holdings that generated millions in monthly income without any effort on his part. The transformation from struggling software engineer to billionaire felt surreal, yet Daniel approached his newfound wealth with careful deliberation rather than impulsive celebration. Emma's relief about the prenup created a noticeable shift in her behavior at home. She became more open about her relationship with Marcus, speaking enthusiastically about their weekend plans and future business ventures. Her happiness was genuine but painful for Daniel to witness, serving as a constant reminder of how thoroughly she had moved beyond their marriage emotionally. She spoke about Marcus with the kind of admiration and excitement she had once reserved for Daniel during their early courtship. The news of Daniel's inheritance broke exactly 2 weeks after the prenup signing, when Chicago Business Journal published a feature story about Henry Morrison's posthumous philanthropy and his mysterious heir. The article detailed the massive fortune and speculated about Daniel's identity, though it respected his privacy by focusing on the inheritance's potential impact on local charitable organizations rather than personal details about the beneficiary. Emma's phone call came 30 minutes after the article appeared online, her voice shaking with disbelief and barely controlled panic. She had been at Marcus's penthouse when a colleague forwarded the news story, immediately recognizing Daniel's name and their shared address. Her questions came rapidly, each one revealing her growing understanding of what the prenuptial agreement had cost her. She demanded explanations about when Daniel had known, why he hadn't told her, and whether the inheritance could somehow be contested or renegotiated. Daniel's response was measured and calm, explaining that he had received notification about the inheritance the same week she had requested the prenup. He acknowledged knowing about his newfound wealth when he signed the agreement, but emphasized that her legal documents had been prepared and presented without any input from him. If she had needed protection from his assets, then the contracts had served their intended purpose perfectly. Emma's attempts to reverse the situation grew increasingly desperate as the magnitude of her miscalculation became clear. She spoke about seeking legal counsel to challenge the prenup on grounds of non-disclosure, though her own expertise in family law made her acutely aware of how difficult such challenges would be to win. Marcus's voice could be heard in the background, presumably offering his own legal opinions about their options for recovering some portion of Daniel's inheritance. The conversation revealed Emma's complete transformation from confident attorney to panicked opportunist. She alternated between expressions of regret about their marriage and calculated inquiries about Daniel's willingness to share his wealth voluntarily. Her tone suggested she was already formulating arguments about moral obligations and their shared history, though she seemed to realize even as she spoke that Daniel held all the legal advantages in their situation. Daniel's final decision came with crystalline clarity as he listened to Emma's increasingly frantic proposals. He would use his inheritance to establish educational foundations benefiting underprivileged communities, particularly programs supporting young Black students pursuing careers in technology and law. The foundation would bear his mother, Sarah's name, honoring the woman who had raised him with dignity despite facing rejection and hardship from the Morrison family decades earlier. When Emma asked directly whether she would receive any portion of his wealth, Daniel's answer was simple and final. The prenuptial agreement she had insisted upon would be honored completely, just as she had intended when she signed it. If she had truly needed protection from his financial claims, then she had achieved exactly what she wanted through her careful legal planning. The phone call ended with Emma's sobbing apologies and desperate pleas for reconsideration, but Daniel felt only profound relief that their marriage was ending. Her betrayal had revealed the true nature of their relationship, and her reaction to his wealth confirmed that money had become more important to her than genuine human connection. Marcus had won exactly what he deserved, a woman whose affections could be purchased with the promise of financial security. The divorce proceedings concluded with remarkable efficiency 6 months later, processed through the same downtown courthouse where Emma had once celebrated her earliest legal victories. She appeared smaller somehow in the familiar environment, her usual confidence diminished by the weight of her spectacular miscalculation. Marcus stood beside her and still maintaining the supportive facade, though observers noted increased tension in their relationship since the inheritance revelation. The prenuptial agreement held firm against every legal challenge Emma's team had attempted, leaving her with exactly what she had originally sought to protect: her own assets and nothing more. Daniel walked away from the courthouse feeling liberated rather than defeated, carrying divorce papers that represented freedom from a relationship that had become hollow performance art. The Lincoln Park townhouse had already been sold, its proceeds divided according to their original purchase agreement, while Daniel moved into a modest apartment near his mother's neighborhood. He had deliberately chosen simplicity over ostentation, finding comfort in familiar surroundings rather than the luxury his wealth could easily afford. The Sarah Thompson Educational Foundation launched on the first anniversary of Henry Morrison's death, housed in a renovated community center on Chicago's South Side. Daniel attended the opening ceremony accompanied by his mother, whose pride and amazement at her son's transformation had grown steadily over the months since the inheritance revelation. Local news coverage focused on the foundation's mission rather than Daniel's personal wealth, respecting his desire for privacy while highlighting the impact of substantial educational investment in underserved communities. The foundation's programs exceeded Daniel's expectations within its first year of operation. Scholarships enabled dozens of talented students to pursue technology and legal education at prestigious universities they could never have afforded otherwise. Mentorship programs connected successful professionals with ambitious young people who lacked access to professional networks. Computer labs and legal aid clinics provided practical resources to families struggling with educational barriers and legal challenges that wealth typically helped people avoid. During a quiet evening at the foundation offices, Daniel encountered Sarah Williams, a 38-year-old education coordinator whose passion for teaching had drawn her to work with the scholarship recipients. Her genuine enthusiasm for helping students achieve their potential reminded Daniel of the idealism he had once possessed before cynicism and disappointment had worn away his optimism. Sarah's intelligence and warmth created an immediate connection that felt refreshingly authentic after years of Emma's calculated interactions. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on shared values rather than financial considerations. Sarah knew about Daniel's wealth but seemed genuinely uninterested in luxury or status symbols, preferring conversations about books, education policy, and social justice issues over discussions of investments or expensive purchases. Her independence and commitment to her own career created a partnership based on mutual respect rather than economic dependence or romantic desperation. Emma's attempts to maintain contact gradually diminished as her new reality settled into permanent disappointment. Her relationship with Marcus deteriorated under the strain of missed financial opportunities and recriminations about legal advice that had backfired spectacularly. Friends reported seeing her alone at professional functions, having apparently learned painful lessons about distinguishing between genuine affection and opportunistic calculation. The woman who had once seemed destined for partnership at a prestigious law firm now struggled with professional setbacks and personal regrets. Marcus disappeared from Chicago's legal community entirely, his cybersecurity business collapsing amid rumors about questionable client relationships and ethical violations. Industry colleagues whispered about his pattern of targeting successful professional women for romantic manipulation, suggesting Emma had been neither his first nor his last victim. His expensive lifestyle had apparently been maintained through methods more creative than legitimate business success, leaving him vulnerable when his schemes attracted unwanted attention. Daniel's transformation extended beyond financial circumstances to encompass his entire approach to life and relationships. The betrayal that had initially devastated him ultimately became a catalyst for authentic self-discovery and meaningful purpose. His mother's stories about overcoming prejudice and hardship inspired him to use his resources for systemic change rather than personal indulgence. The Morrison family's historical racism would be countered by educational opportunities that created lasting impact across generations. The foundation's success attracted national attention, leading to speaking engagements and consulting opportunities that Daniel accepted selectively. He spoke passionately about education as the most effective tool for breaking cycles of poverty and discrimination, emphasizing individual achievement over inherited advantages. His presentations avoided personal details about his inheritance while focusing on practical strategies for educational philanthropy and community development. Standing in his mother's apartment one Sunday evening, Daniel reflected on the journey from discovering his grandfather's legacy to building something meaningful from unexpected wealth. Sarah's laughter drifted from the kitchen where she was helping prepare dinner, her presence adding warmth to the small space where he had first learned about his true family history. The apartment contained more genuine happiness than the expensive townhouse he had shared with Emma, proving that wealth's value lay in its purposeful application rather than accumulation. The future stretched ahead with possibilities Daniel could never have imagined during his darkest moments of marital betrayal and identity crisis. Emma's prenuptial agreement had protected him from her opportunism while teaching him invaluable lessons about distinguishing between love and manipulation. His grandfather's inheritance had provided resources, but Sarah's love offered something far more precious: authentic partnership with someone who valued his character over his bank account, creating the foundation for a life built on genuine connection rather than financial calculation.